Hello, family. This is part 2 of the previous story. In case you missed part 1, check the previous video or check the pinned link in the comment section. Please subscribe and leave a like for us. It means the world to us. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The lawyer's office smelled of aged paper and subtle betrayal. Rachel sat still, her fingers laced tightly on her lap as the estate attorney, Mr. Femi, flipped through her mother's archived documents. There was an unusual request a few weeks before your accident, he said, sliding a file across the desk. Your sister, Vanessa, came by inquiring about early access to your portion of the inheritance. We denied her, of course. You were the rightful heir after your mother's death. Rachel's stomach dropped. Vanessa? She whispered. Her voice trembled, more from the weight of realization than shock. The betrayal she had been unraveling for weeks suddenly took a cruel turn. Tina had played her role, but this went beyond friendship, it bled into family. As she walked to her car, the truth echoed like thunder in her ears. It wasn't just Bruce. It wasn't just Tina. Vanessa had her fingerprints on this too. Her mind replayed moments she'd brushed off. Vanessa's sudden silence months ago, the awkwardness at family gatherings, her clipped tone when Rachel once mentioned revisiting their mother's will. Rachel gripped the steering wheel, heart racing. She remembered Jacqueline's words, "Watch everyone, especially the one closest to you." And who had been closer than blood? Her sister, the woman who once braided her hair and stood beside her in grief, had been waiting in the shadows with a dagger. Rachel felt the old wound of betrayal rip wider, and she knew now the worst was not behind her. It had only just begun. Rachel hadn't touched the box Tina left behind since her last confrontation. It was buried deep in her storage closet, covered by blankets and unopened files. That evening, something compelled her to return to it. She rummaged until her fingers brushed a small, weighty object. It was an old black burner phone, cracked at the edges, faintly warm from the summer heat, trapped inside the box. Her breath caught. Curiosity bloomed into a cold certainty. Plugging it into her charger, she watched as the screen blinked to life. Most files had been wiped, but in the message folder were several unsent drafts. Her eyes widened as she scrolled. V says she can cover the cost if we use her lawyer, one message read. Another said, tell Bruce to relax, V's in control now. Rachel's pulse pounded. She'd assumed V was just a code name. But the truth settled like stone. It was short for Vanessa. A few voice messages followed, distorted and grainy. One featured Tina's voice, low and anxious. She's asking questions again. What if she finds out? A beat. Then a female voice responded with chilling confidence. Let her ask. She won't live long enough to answer them. Rachel's knees buckled. She sat on the edge of her bed, the phone still in hand, her body suddenly cold despite the heat. She had been circling Tina, watching Bruce, but Vanessa had been the conductor behind it all. Her sister hadn't just betrayed her. She'd orchestrated it. She dialed Harry immediately. I need you, she said, her voice shaking. There's more. There's so much more. When he arrived minutes later, she handed him the phone wordlessly. He played one of the messages, his jaw tightening. She called your sister the boss. Ratch. I think this was never just about jealousy. I think it was about control. Rachel nodded, eyes burning. Then it's time I take mine back. The living room was quiet except for the faint hum of the ceiling fan and the soft click as Harry connected the burner phone to his laptop. He scrolled through its recovered voice memos, isolated one labeled Midnight Call, and hit play. A few seconds of static passed before Bruce's voice filtered through. She's suspicious again. You need to do something. If she talks to the lawyer, this entire thing falls apart. Make sure she doesn't make it to that meeting. The timestamp was 2 days before the accident. Rachel sat frozen, her hand over her mouth. She looked at Harry, whose face had drained of color. He was part of it, she whispered. He wanted me gone before I ever got the truth. Harry didn't respond. The evidence spoke for itself. The man Rachel once trusted with her life had plotted the end of it. Rachel listened to the clip again, this time focusing on the voice responding to Bruce, her sister's voice. Relax, Vanessa said, clear and cold. Tina will handle it. You'll have your part. I'll have mine. Just make sure she signs the property handover first. Harry paused the audio. They were planning to erase you legally and physically. Rachel closed her eyes. I wasn't a wife to him. I was an obstacle. She got up slowly and walked to the window, staring out at the swaying trees like they could calm the fire rising in her chest. Her mind spun through years of memories, birthdays, anniversaries, family dinners, tainted now by the voices of betrayal. We have what we need, Harry said gently. We can take this to the police now. But Rachel shook her head. Not yet. I want to hear it all. I want them to feel safe. I want them to believe they've already won. Her voice was steel. The hunter was no longer asleep. Rachel drove across town with a single name echoing in her head, Aunt Mirabel. Her mother's only living sister had always been quiet at family functions, always observing, rarely speaking. Rachel hadn't visited in nearly a year, but something in her gut told her this woman held pieces to a puzzle she didn't know she was solving. When Aunt Mirabel opened the door, her expression softened into quiet concern. "You've lost weight," she said, leading Rachel into the parlor. "You look like someone who's seen the inside of betrayal." Rachel sat down, her voice low but firm. "I need to know when Vanessa and Bruce started meeting behind my back. And I need you to tell me everything." Mirabel hesitated, twisting her fingers nervously. "You should leave it alone," she murmured. "Some truths bring no peace." But Rachel wouldn't let up. "They tried to kill me, Auntie." A long silence passed before Mirabel leaned back in her chair, sighing deeply. "It started 2 years ago. Vanessa visited me crying, saying Bruce made her feel seen. At first, I thought she meant emotionally, until she mentioned he wanted to share the legacy. I didn't know they meant your mother's inheritance." Rachel's jaw clenched. "And you said nothing?" Mirabel's eyes glistened. "I was a coward. I thought it would pass. I thought they'd realize the sickness of it all. But when I heard about your accident, I knew." Rachel stood, her limbs trembling. "You let me walk into fire." Mirabel reached out. "I was afraid, but I'm ready to help now. I have Vanessa's letter, one she begged me to burn." Rachel held out her hand. "Give it to me." And when she left that house, she didn't just carry the letter, she carried proof, fire, and fury. Her own blood had drawn a blade. Now she was going to return it. The street was quiet except for the breeze rustling the bookstore awning as Rachel stepped inside, unsure what she was hoping to find. She hadn't seen Jacqueline in weeks. The store still smelled of old pages and sandalwood. At the far end, by a sunlit shelf, stood the familiar figure wrapped in indigo. "You've found the rot at the root," Jacqueline said without turning. Rachel's throat tightened. "It was her," she whispered. "Vanessa, my own sister. And Bruce, he was never just weak. He was willing." Jacqueline finally turned, her gaze heavier than ever. The betrayal of strangers wounds the body, but betrayal from family, that scars the soul. Rachel sank into the leather chair opposite her. "How do you carry something like this without breaking?" Jacqueline answered softly. "You don't. You break, but you rebuild differently." Silence lingered before Jacqueline reached into her bag and placed a folded piece of kente cloth on the table. Inside was a carved wooden pendant. "From my mother," she said. "She wore it when she left a husband who tried to erase her. I think it belongs to you now." Rachel's fingers trembled as she took it. "I keep asking myself what I did to deserve this kind of betrayal." Jacqueline gave a half smile. "You didn't earn it. You just stood in the way of people who believed they deserved more than they ever gave." Rachel held the pendant against her chest, its warmth surprising. "I want to fight, but I don't want to become them." Jacqueline leaned in. "Then don't fight to destroy. Fight to expose. Truth doesn't shout, it reveals." As Rachel left the store, the sunlight felt different on her skin. She was no longer just surviving. She was preparing for war, with clarity as her sword. 2 days later, Rachel sat in the cold, polished office of her family's longtime legal advisor. Mr. Olanian wore a serious expression as he slid a document across the table. "Your maternal grandfather placed a condition on your inheritance," he explained. "It was to be fully activated on your 34th birthday, provided no legal complications arise." Rachel scanned the clause highlighted in yellow. The sum was staggering, but the part that made her hands go cold was the note. "Shall pass solely to Rachel Oladil, barring any incapacitation, death, or will revision." She looked up slowly. Vanessa knew, didn't she? Mr. Olanian nodded. She approached our firm several times, attempting to contest it, to substitute herself as next of kin. We denied her, but she persisted. Rachel leaned back. So if I died, she'd be the legal fallback, he confirmed grimly. Rachel walked out of that building more certain than she had ever been in her life. They hadn't tried to scare her. They had tried to remove her entirely. And they almost succeeded. The truth carved itself deeper with each breath she took. At home, she stared at her mother's old portrait, finally understanding why her mother had insisted on secrecy with the inheritance. You knew, Rachel murmured. You knew they'd come for it. Her phone buzzed. It was Harry. Any confirmation? She texted back one word, all. Then she turned to her journal and wrote for the first time in days. They plan to erase me for money, but I will walk into that courtroom and remind them who they couldn't kill. Her pen paused. I don't need revenge. I need consequences. The countdown to her birthday had begun, and so had their reckoning. The next Saturday, Rachel hosted a lunch. Bruce and Vanessa both showed up dressed in casual cheer, masks worn with perfection. Rachel greeted them with a warm smile, her eyes betraying nothing. You two have been such a comfort through all this, she said sweetly, pouring them glasses of freshly brewed hibiscus. Vanessa laughed, her voice melodic. Of course, sis. You're our everything. Bruce nodded, leaning in. We just want to see you happy again. Rachel smiled wider, and I feel safer already. She watched as they sipped, completely at ease, oblivious to the wire Harry had clipped beneath the table, recording every sugary lie. They didn't know they were being studied like exhibits. They believed the act was working. After lunch, Rachel led them to the garden, her mother's favorite spot. I've been thinking about updating my will, she said lightly, watching their eyes flicker. Just to avoid confusion. You both mean so much to me. Maybe I should make provisions for everyone I love. Bruce cleared his throat. That sounds thoughtful. Vanessa looked smug. That's why you're the jewel of this family. Rachel chuckled. Let's all meet again next week. I'll have the lawyer draft something preliminary. As they left, Bruce kissed her cheek and whispered, You're stronger than you know. Rachel waited until the gate shut behind them, then turned to Harry, who stood in the shadows near the kitchen door. They're so comfortable, she said, slipping off her gloves. Let's make sure they stay that way. The hunter didn't need a weapon. She just needed their trust, and she already owned it. Nightfall crept over the house as Rachel moved like a ghost through her own rooms, planting truth in silence. Harry arrived with a small black case and opened it on the coffee table. Inside were tiny voice-activated recorders. They'll trigger the moment someone speaks, he explained. Battery lasts 48 hours. We'll sweep them after every visit. Rachel nodded, pointing out the bookshelf, the dining centerpiece, and even the ornate lamp near the veranda, every place Bruce and Vanessa liked to linger. Make sure we cover the study too. Vanessa always peers into my documents when she thinks I'm not looking. As Harry planted the last device, Rachel leaned against the wall, arms folded. They think I'm breaking. I'm going to let them think that a little longer. The next morning, Rachel wore a faded robe and smeared lip balm on her cheeks to look unwell. When Bruce arrived to check in, she sat curled on the couch, eyes unfocused. I haven't been sleeping, she said quietly. I feel like I'm going crazy. Bruce's eyes gleamed. You've been through so much. Maybe you need help. Someone to take over things for a while. She nodded slowly, handing him an envelope. Could you drop this with the lawyer? I think I'm forgetting things again. He took it, face unreadable. As soon as he left, Harry emerged from the hallway, holding up the recording device. He bit. Rachel exhaled. Let's see how much rope he gives himself before he tries to tighten it. In the shadows, the trap had been set, not with threats, but with feigned fragility. And now, it was only a matter of time before truth walked in wearing their voices. Later that week, Rachel called her brother Chuka, who had been living abroad for years. He answered in seconds, his voice filled with hesitation and warmth. Rachel, is everything okay? She paused, then asked softly, When was the last time you saw Vanessa? The silence lingered before he replied, around November. She and Bruce visited while I was in Lagos for work. Said They were planning something special for your birthday. Rachel sat back, stunned. Did they mention me? Chuka hesitated. Only in passing. Vanessa said you were overwhelmed, and Bruce was trying to help manage things. Rachel clenched the phone tighter. They lied to you. They were planning to cut me out. All this time, they played family while scheming behind my back. Chuka sighed deeply. I didn't know. I swear, Ratch, if I had, you didn't need to know. But now you do, she interrupted, and I need a favor. She asked him to email the photos and correspondence from that trip. If Vanessa and Bruce had traveled internationally and left any paperwork trail, it could establish premeditation. Chuka agreed without protest. I'm so sorry, Rachel, he said. I wish I had looked deeper. She smiled faintly, though he couldn't see it. You were the only one who didn't. After hanging up, she forwarded everything to Harry, who immediately noticed two key details in the photo timestamps. They matched the week Rachel's car brakes had been tampered with. Vanessa hadn't just watched it happen from afar. She had planned it, down to the moment Rachel might not survive the ride home. But fate and a woman named Jacqueline had rewritten the ending. The night was silent, save for the soft click of Rachel's study door opening on the footage. She and Harry sat in the dim glow of the laptop, listening. Bruce's voice came through first. She's softer again. I think the accident finally did what it was supposed to. Then came Vanessa's low, deliberate chilling. Good. We'll draft the amendment next week. Once the funds clear, we move. Tina did what she needed to. She was a pawn. This is our game now. Rachel's hand trembled on the mouse. She's not even sorry, she whispered. She said it, lie was a problem they outsourced. Harry nodded, voice tight. We've got her, Rachel. Both of them. This is ironclad. The conversation continued as Bruce added, She still doesn't suspect. She gave me the envelope, said she trusts me. Vanessa laughed. That's the beauty of it. She always trusted the wrong people. The call ended with Bruce's final words. Soon, I'll marry the right Aladil. Rachel's breath left her body like wind knocked from the chest. She leaned back, pressing a hand to her heart, eyes glassy. He was never planning to stay, she murmured. He only married me to get through the door. Harry gently reached over and paused the audio. We take this to the police first thing tomorrow. Rachel stared at the screen, face steel cold. No, she said. We invite them to dinner one last time. Let them raise a glass to my final trust. Then we burn everything down. The recording played one final time. Rachel sat in silence, her face expressionless as the last of Bruce's words echoed. Soon, I'll marry the right Aladil. Her hands slowly reached for the pendant Jacqueline had given her, now a quiet weight at her neck. There was nothing left to question. No more shadows to chase. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was murder attempted and legacy hijacked. She wiped her face, though no tears had fallen. They were willing to take everything, she whispered, including my name, my breath, my life. She rose from the desk like a woman rising from ashes. I gave them grace, she said aloud, as if testifying to an invisible jury. Now they'll meet the consequences. That evening, Harry found her outside, barefoot on the lawn, staring at the sky. We don't have to wait, he said carefully. We have enough. We can turn it in first thing. Rachel looked at him, eyes sharp but calm. And let them spin it, plead it down. Say it was a misunderstanding. She shook her head slowly. No, they need to feel the walls closing in. I want them to walk into their own trial without knowing they're the defendants. Harry watched her in silence, then finally said, You're stronger than I've ever seen you. She gave a tired smile. No, I'm just finally done pretending I'm not. She walked back inside and locked the door behind her, not out of fear, but because she was finished letting snakes walk freely through her peace. The next morning, Rachel handed over the voice memos, the burner phone, and the letter Vanessa wrote to Aunt Mirabelle, all organized and labeled. Harry worked methodically, building a digital archive. We'll need a timeline, he said. Proof of intent, motive, and means. Rachel nodded. I've got the estate documentation, the hospital report, the mechanic's findings about the tampered brakes, and Chuka's travel records. Harry scanned through Vanessa's emails, many of them recovered through mirroring Tina's old device. One thread between Vanessa and an offshore law firm discussed Rachel's medical proxies. She had attempted to declare Rachel legally unstable to seize power of attorney. Harry's jaw tightened. She wasn't waiting for you to die. She was making arrangements in case you didn't. They moved quickly. By evening, they'd filed the complete report with a trusted prosecutor Rachel had met during her work on a past women's safety campaign. "We'll act quietly," the prosecutor assured. "Let them get comfortable. We'll seize them when their hands are still dirty." Rachel nodded, passing her a flash drive. "The night they toast to their success, I want cuffs waiting at the door." Harry leaned against the wall, watching Rachel handle the moment with poise. "Do you want to go somewhere? Clear your head?" She shook her head. "No, I want to stay here. I want to see their faces when the illusion shatters." And so the trap was no longer a secret. It was a promise. They would smile in her face one last time, just before they lost their freedom forever. The dining table was set for 6. Rachel wore a satin blue dress, simple but striking, her hair swept back, lips the color of defiance. Bruce arrived first, carrying a bottle of wine. "Thought we'd celebrate your recovery," he smiled, pressing a kiss to her cheek. "What's the occasion?" Rachel returned the gesture with a slow nod. "Closure," she said. Vanessa arrived minutes later, draped in pearls and confidence. "You look like your old self," she said, as she embraced her sister. "Maybe even better." Rachel poured them drinks, each motion precise. "To healing," she said, raising her glass. They clinked without hesitation. Over dinner, Rachel asked about their week. Vanessa mentioned real estate inquiries. Bruce spoke of long meetings and investment calls. "You two are busy," Rachel mused, slicing her grilled fish. "Hardly noticed I was gone." Vanessa leaned back, laughing. "You're back now. That's all that matters." Rachel nodded, setting down her knife. "Do you remember what I said last time you were here?" Bruce tilted his head. "You talked about revising your will." Rachel smiled gently, but with a glint in her eye. "Good, because tonight I revise everything. Not with a pen, but with the truth." Bruce's smile faltered. Vanessa looked up sharply. Rachel's voice dropped. "The inheritance. The accident, Tina, I know it all." For the first time, the mask slipped, and the only sound was the quiet gasp of guilt coming home to roost. The morning air was thick with silence when flashing lights broke through the neighborhood's calm. At exactly 5:43 a.m., 2 black sedans rolled into Bruce's driveway, followed by an unmarked police vehicle. Rachel stood by her window, robes cinched at the waist, heart steady. Across the street, Vanessa stumbled out of the front door in a silk nightgown, confusion quickly giving way to panic. "What's going on?" she demanded as officers surrounded her. "Vanessa Oladell, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit attempted murder, fraud, and obstruction of justice," one officer said as he read her rights. Bruce came out moments later, barefoot, face pale. "This is a mistake," he insisted. "She's lying. This is her revenge." Rachel watched as they were both handcuffed and placed into separate cars. There were no protests now, no smirks, no smug exchanges. Just the cold realization that the world they had built on manipulation had finally collapsed. Jacqueline had told her once, "The truth doesn't shout, but when it speaks, it echoes." This moment echoed louder than any courtroom. Rachel turned from the window as the cars disappeared down the road. The coffee she brewed that morning tasted different, not because it was sweeter, but because it was hers. Harry entered moments later, holding a USB and nodding. "All files have been turned in. We move to court next." Rachel smiled faintly. Let them sit in a cell and think about how small their empire really was. No headlines, no speeches, just justice in quiet motion. That afternoon, Rachel returned to the bookstore. It was empty save for the slow creak of the ceiling fan and the scent of camphor and old wood. Jacqueline stood near the poetry aisle, her hands folded over a thick anthology. She turned before Rachel even spoke. "So, it's done," Rachel nodded. "They were arrested this morning. The charges are strong. The evidence, irreversible." Jacqueline gave a slow nod, her eyes soft. "And what does your spirit feel?" Rachel hesitated, relieved but not healed. Jacqueline sat on the bench near the back. "Justice does not restore what was broken. It only stops more breaking from happening. Healing, that is your burden to choose." Rachel sat beside her, suddenly exhausted. "I don't know how to forgive them." Jacqueline's voice was gentle but firm. "Then don't. Not now. Start by forgiving yourself for trusting, for staying, for not seeing sooner. Begin there. Rachel swallowed the lump in her throat. I wanted to destroy them, Jacqueline smiled. But you didn't. You let truth do the burning. She reached into her bag and handed Rachel a sealed envelope. I wrote this when I first met you, when I saw the storm around your shoulders. Open it when the trial ends. Rachel took it without opening it, eyes brimming. Will you still be here? Jacqueline stood. I never leave the stories that need me. But one day, you won't need me anymore. And with that, Rachel realized for the first time she wasn't lost. She was simply rebuilding. The courtroom buzzed with quiet tension as Rachel took her seat beside Harry. Cameras were banned, but reporters still packed the gallery, sketchpads in hand. On the opposite bench, Bruce looked pale, his usual composure cracked. Vanessa sat beside him in a gray suit 2 sizes too big, her confidence swallowed whole. The judge called the session to order, and the prosecutor began with the timeline. The evidence unfolded methodically. Rachel's hospital record, the tampered brake report, the phone records, and finally, the voice recordings. The courtroom fell silent as Bruce's voice filled the room. She's suspicious again. Make sure she doesn't make it to the lawyer. Gasps echoed. Vanessa dropped her head. Bruce shifted, his jaw twitching. Then came the inheritance documents, and Rachel's copy of the letter Vanessa had written to their aunt, trying to manipulate succession rights. The room spun with revelation. The defense scrambled, objecting on technicalities, but the damage was done. During recess, Bruce's attorney approached with a plea deal proposal. Rachel refused it without hesitation. They didn't give me mercy, she said. They don't get it from me. When court resumed, the judge allowed the last piece of evidence, Tina's written affidavit. She had confessed everything, how she was recruited, manipulated, and ultimately used as bait. Rachel didn't look at Bruce or Vanessa. She simply stared at the judge, waiting. Not for revenge, but for truth to wear its robe and speak. The gavel hadn't fallen yet, but the reckoning had already begun. Tina entered the courtroom wearing a beige blouse and no makeup, her usual polished confidence stripped away. She avoided Rachel's gaze as she was sworn in, fidgeting with the edge of her sleeve. The prosecutor began gently. You were close to the victim, yes? Tina nodded. She was like a sister to me. Her voice cracked, drawing a few murmurs. Then why agree to hurt her? The courtroom fell into silence. Tina took a breath. Because I was stupid and afraid. Vanessa told me Rachel didn't deserve what she was getting. Bruce said they were doing the family a favor, fixing what Rachel couldn't handle. She looked up briefly at Rachel. I believed them, and I believed they'd leave me alone if I helped. The prosecutor leaned closer. And what did they ask you to do? Tina's face crumpled slightly. Pretend I cared, keep her distracted, be the one she trusted so they could plan. The red car, that was my task. I was supposed to spook her, but I hit her. I panicked. Jacqueline pulled her just in time. Rachel sat stone still, her hands clenched in her lap. Her best friend, her betrayer, was finally speaking in full sentences. Tina wiped her face. I didn't know about the inheritance at first, but when Vanessa showed me the documents, it was like watching a funeral plan. Only the body hadn't dropped yet. Her voice dropped to a whisper. They used me. I just wanted to matter to someone. I didn't know it would cost Rachel everything. The courtroom shifted, no longer angry, just heartbroken. But for Rachel, sympathy wasn't enough. Truth wasn't an apology. It was an unveiling, and Tina's mask had fallen for good. Bruce's defense insisted he take the stand. He entered confidently, dressed immaculately, his smile careful but forced. Mr. Oladell, the prosecutor began, how long were you married to the victim? Bruce smiled faintly. 7 years. And how long were you in contact with her sister, Vanessa? He hesitated. We were close. But not how you're implying. The prosecutor raised a hand. Let's talk about implication. He played the voice note where Bruce said, once the money's released, she's out. Bruce shifted uncomfortably. That was taken out of context. A laugh rippled through the gallery. Out of context? You meant what? Rachel was being moved to a beach house? The judge warned the courtroom to settle. Bruce cleared his throat, reaching for charm. I was under pressure. Vanessa misled me. She made me believe Rachel was hiding something dangerous. Rachel shook her head slowly. Bruce always had a backup story, a new context. But now, his performance was failing under the weight of hard evidence. The prosecutor moved in. "You're saying Vanessa masterminded everything, and you were just her puppet?" Bruce looked toward Vanessa, who stared forward, expression unreadable. "I didn't want anyone hurt," he offered. "I just wanted to protect our future." The prosecutor delivered the final blow. "Then why did you research how to transfer estate power from an incapacitated spouse 3 days before the accident?" Bruce stammered. "It was routine. A misunderstanding." The court erupted again. The judge called for order. But Rachel didn't need order. She already had the truth. And watching Bruce squirm in the witness chair was the last performance she would ever attend in his theater of lies. The jury filed in with solemn expressions. Rachel's fingers gripped the edge of her seat, her body still but pulsing with every second. The forewoman stood, unfolding the slip of paper slowly, her voice steady. "We, the jury, find the defendants, Bruce Alladil and Vanessa Alladil, guilty on all counts." A gasp rippled through the room. Vanessa collapsed into her chair. Bruce blinked in disbelief, his jaw clenched. The judge nodded and adjusted his glasses. "Sentencing will proceed immediately." As murmurs rose, the gavel struck sharply. "Order." Rachel didn't move. The words had landed like thunder, but the storm inside her had already passed. Justice had spoken, not through rage, not through revenge, but through truth that could no longer be buried. As Bruce was escorted out, he turned toward Rachel. "I still loved you," he said quietly, almost pleading. Rachel met his eyes and shook her head once. "Then you wouldn't have left me for dead." Vanessa was next, her expression a twisted mix of disbelief and fury. "You think you've won?" she hissed as the guards took her arms. "No," Rachel replied softly. "I just survived what you couldn't kill." As they were led away, Rachel's hands trembled, but not from fear. From the release of carrying so much pain for so long. Harry reached for her hand. "You okay?" She nodded, eyes glassy. "They're gone, and I'm still here." She stood slowly, head high, heart full of quiet triumph. The woman behind the wheel of her own life had finally taken it back. As the courthouse doors swung open, Rachel stepped into a flurry of camera flashes and questions thrown like daggers. Microphones crowded around her, voices clamoring. "Mrs. Oladil, how do you feel about the verdict? Do you believe justice was served?" Rachel paused, her expression unreadable. Harry gently touched her arm. "You don't have to say a word." She gave the smallest nod and kept walking, each step calm, each breath collected. She had already said everything she needed to inside that courtroom. The world could speculate. They could write their headlines and edit their clips. But the real story was already etched in the silence she chose to carry. She reached her car, opened the door, and sat inside, staring out the windshield as her chest finally heaved. Not with tears, but with the weight of release. Her phone buzzed, messages from distant relatives, old classmates, former coworkers. Some apologized for never reaching out, others expressed shock. She set the phone aside. Closure didn't come in public sympathy, it lived in knowing she no longer had to rehearse survival. Harry sat in the driver's seat, watching her. "You never broke," he said. Rachel looked out the window. "I did, over and over, but I chose not to stay broken." She leaned back, the courthouse growing smaller in the rearview mirror. For the first time in years, she wasn't running from anything. She was just going home. The new apartment was nothing like her old house, and that was exactly the point. No grand entrance, no cold marble floors. Just a small, sunlit living room with bookshelves that smelled like stories. A kitchen with mismatched plates, and a bedroom that felt like a pause rather than a performance. Rachel unpacked slowly, deliberately, each box a reminder of what she chose to take with her, and what she'd finally left behind. The walls were bare at first, then filled with frames, not of weddings or anniversaries, but of landscapes, art pieces she had loved but never bought. For the first time, her space reflected her, not a version someone else molded. She hung a soft blue curtain in the study and placed Jacqueline's wooden pendant on the windowsill, where morning light could find it. That afternoon she sat cross-legged on the rug with a mug of ginger tea, notebook in her lap, pen dancing freely. No longer was she journaling for evidence. She was writing for herself. She scribbled, "Peace isn't loud." It waits quietly at the door until you choose it. Her shoulders dropped as if those words physically released her. A knock interrupted her thoughts. It was the neighbor, a single mother with 2 kids who had baked banana bread. "Welcome," she said simply. Rachel smiled. "Thank you. It's good to be somewhere new." And she meant it. She didn't need a mansion or a title. She just needed safety, and this place whispered it with every silent, honest breath. The flowers were wild, freshly cut from someone's garden, imperfect and bright. Harry arrived with them just after sunset, knocking gently before stepping in. "I brought these because they're messy and unpredictable," he said, placing the bouquet on her table. "And they reminded me of everything that makes you." "You," Rachel laughed, surprised by how genuine it felt. "And here I thought you came with another USB drive of evidence." Harry smiled. "No more evidence. Just visits." He sat across from her, eyes softer than she'd ever seen. "I've watched you fight so hard. I just wanted to see you breathe." She poured tea, and they talked, really talked. About the trial, about silence, about the way trauma redefines time. "You never asked me for help," he said, voice low. Rachel looked into her cup. "Because asking meant I wasn't as strong as I pretended." Harry shook his head. "But you were. Because you walked through fire without losing your heart." She didn't reply, but a tear traced her cheek, quiet and free. Later, as he left, he paused at the door. "If you ever want something more than visits." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to, Rachel smiled. "Right now, I'm learning how to be alone without being lonely. But I'll keep the door unlocked." As he walked away, the room remained full, not with echoes of the past, but with the possibility of something beautiful. Something she would choose, not just survive. Rachel found the letter days after settling into her new routine. It had been tucked inside a second envelope, buried under her shawls, Jacqueline's handwriting precise and elegant, the ink slightly faded. She sat in the quiet of her new home and opened it slowly. "Dear Rachel," it began. "Some storms don't roar, they whisper your name in quiet betrayal. You survived not because you knew how, but because you chose not to stop walking. This letter isn't for strength, it's for softness. When everything settles, let your heart exhale. You do not have to carry the weight of what they did forever. You are not their crime." Rachel wiped her cheek, already feeling the tears as she continued reading, her heart catching on every word. The letter ended with a passage Rachel would never forget. "The pain they gave you cannot be returned, but you do not have to keep it. Grow without guilt, smile without proof, and love again, not them, but yourself." Rachel folded it gently and placed it inside the back of her journal, right next to a blank page. She lit a candle that night, not for mourning, but for release. "Thank you," she whispered into the flame, "for seeing me before I did." She didn't know if Jacqueline had left town or simply melted back into her quiet corner of the world. But wherever she was, Rachel felt her presence like steady breath in the room. It was the kind of goodbye that didn't ache, it just settled softly in the soul and stayed. The notification came via courier, a slim envelope with embossed lettering. Rachel's name was printed formally, but the note inside was simple. The estate had officially been released. Her grandfather's will had passed every legal review. She now held full ownership of the business shares, land deeds, and locked financial accounts he had left behind. But the weight of it didn't sit on her like she once imagined it would. It didn't scream power or legacy. It whispered responsibility. She didn't race to spend a dime. Instead, she sat at her desk, opened her notebook, and began to list where it would quietly go. Legal aid services, safe houses for women escaping violence, scholarships for young girls studying law. When her financial advisor called to review her options, Rachel was clear. No publicity, no foundation naming, no photographs. It goes where it matters, not where it's seen. The woman on the other end was silent for a beat before responding. "That might be the most meaningful use of power I've heard all year." Rachel smiled. "Good, then let's get to work." That night, she didn't celebrate with champagne or luxury. She brewed lemongrass tea, sat by her small garden, and watched the sky turn silver. She thought of her mother, of Jacqueline, of all the versions of herself she had outgrown. The money hadn't saved her, it hadn't healed her. But now it would do what it was meant to do, protect someone else from ever needing to survive the way she did. The headline was tucked in the corner of the newspaper: "Appeal denied for convicted sister in estate conspiracy case." Rachel didn't read the full article. She skimmed just long enough to catch the quote from Vanessa's lawyer, lamenting a rushed process and unfair representation. Rachel folded the paper neatly and placed it back on the table without a word. She didn't feel triumphant. There was no glee, no bitter smile, just stillness. "You had your chance to come clean," she murmured to no one. "You chose silence. Now live in it." She poured herself a glass of water and continued her morning as if the news had been about someone she'd once known and forgotten. Later that day, Harry dropped by with groceries and mentioned the article. "I thought it might bring you peace," he said. Rachel looked at him thoughtfully. "It didn't bring peace, just closure." She paused. "It's strange. I used to wonder if I'd ever feel safe again. Now, I realize I don't need her to be free for me to be free." Harry nodded slowly. "That's healing, Rach. That's what that is." She smiled faintly and returned to chopping vegetables. There were no more battles to fight, no more courtrooms to endure. Vanessa's voice had been silenced, not by vengeance, but by law, by truth, and by the quiet strength of the woman she'd tried to erase. And Rachel? She was still standing, still breathing, still rebuilding a life that would never again be borrowed or betrayed. Rachel stood near the edge of the open auction lot, arms folded, heart unexpectedly still. Before her, surrounded by rows of rusting steel and plastic tags, was the red sedan. The same car that nearly ended her life. It looked smaller now, less sinister, more machine than monster. A mechanic opened the hood for inspection, but Rachel didn't move. She wasn't here to buy or bid. She was here to witness. A volunteer walked up beside her, clipboard in hand. "You interested in this one?" Rachel shook her head slowly. "No, just passing through." The woman glanced at her face, clearly sensing something unspoken. Old cars hold stories. Sometimes letting them go is the best part. Rachel took a step closer. Her fingers curled as if to reach for the door, but she didn't. She had opened that door once, unknowingly stepping into a betrayal she hadn't deserved. Now the door could stay closed. Permanently. "You were supposed to take me away," she whispered, barely audible. "But I outlived you." A breeze passed, gentle but firm. She turned without fanfare and walked away, her steps slow, measured. She didn't need to see who bought it. She didn't need to tell anyone she had come. Closure didn't always roar. It sometimes arrived in the quiet turning of one's back, in the refusal to carry ghosts home again. By the time she reached her car, the red sedan was nothing but a silhouette behind her, swallowed by sunlight and distance. The interview was held in a small, warmly lit room, no audience, no live stream, just 2 chairs and a camera crew who spoke gently and with respect. Rachel agreed to it on one condition. It wouldn't be about the trial. It would be about surviving, about starting again. The interviewer, a quiet woman in her 40s, leaned forward. "Why now?" she asked. Rachel took a breath, her voice firm. "Because stories like mine don't always get heard unless someone loses everything publicly. But women survive this privately every day, and nobody notices." The interviewer nodded. "What helped you heal the most?" Rachel answered without hesitation. "Being believed. By myself first, and then by people who didn't try to rewrite what happened." Later in the segment, she was asked what advice she'd give to other women who were in the shadows of betrayal. Rachel looked directly into the camera. "You don't owe anyone your silence, or your smile, or your forgiveness." Her eyes glistened, but she didn't blink them away. Survival isn't just waking up. It's standing up when everything in you wants to hide. It's walking forward when the memory of what they did is still fresh behind you. The interviewer sat in reverent quiet. "That's powerful," she finally said. Rachel managed a small smile. "It's just truth. And I think truth deserves a microphone once in a while." As she left the studio that evening, her feet felt light, not because the weight was gone, but because she had finally set it down, piece by piece, in places where it could no longer hurt her. The email came unexpectedly, no subject line, no salutation. Just a few plain words from an unfamiliar sender's address. "I left the country. I'm trying to live differently. I know you'll never forgive me, but I needed you to know. You were the only real friend I ever had. I'm sorry." Rachel stared at the screen, unmoved. There was no attachment, no plea for response. Just a confession poured into silence. She didn't delete it, but she didn't reply either. Some things needed to echo. She closed the laptop and poured herself a glass of water, standing by the window as dusk crept into the edges of the sky. Later that night, she opened her journal and began writing, not to Tina, not about Tina, but to herself. Some apologies don't come wrapped in healing. Some come like thorns, truthful, but still sharp. And I no longer need to bleed to believe someone regrets what they did. She underlined the last sentence slowly. Tina's silence, her disappearance, her remorse, it all felt like a shadow from a life Rachel no longer belonged to. Forgiveness wasn't the goal anymore. Freedom was. And Tina had given her neither in the past nor now. She had simply stepped aside, and that in the end was enough. Rachel closed her journal and turned off the light. That night, her dreams were filled with laughter, not of the past, but of moments not yet lived. There were no balloons, no music, no list of invited guests. The apartment was quiet, save for the soft hum of the fan overhead and the occasional creak of floorboards as Rachel moved about with deliberate grace. She wore a loose linen dress, barefoot, her hair wrapped in a soft scarf. A small cake sat on the table, with a single gold candle planted in the center. Beside it, a steaming mug of hibiscus tea and a folded card she had written to herself the night before. She lit the candle and sat, the room gently glowing in its flicker. No fanfare, no noise, just breath, stillness, and the sound of a woman remembering how far she had come. She didn't make a wish as she stared into the flame. Instead, she spoke aloud with a voice steady and quiet. "I made it. You didn't win. You didn't destroy me." Her eyes did not tear this time. There was nothing left to grieve, only space to honor. She blew out the candle slowly, like sealing a promise between her past and present. A knock came shortly after. Harry stood in the doorway with a wrapped gift, something small. "Didn't know if I should stop by," he said. Rachel smiled and stepped aside. "I'm glad you did." They sat together, not as saviors or survivors, but as two people who understood the strength in silence. "So, 34, Harry teased lightly. Rachel raised her tea, to beginnings. Not new ones, just honest ones. And for the first time in her adult life, Rachel felt every year she'd lived had been leading her here. The sky was pale blue when Rachel arrived at the small cemetery nestled on the outskirts of town. She walked with ease, holding a bouquet of freshly cut tulips, Jacqueline's favorite. The grave was simple, adorned with a carved wooden pendant like the one Rachel now wore. She knelt, brushing off a few stray leaves. "You told me once that storms don't always come to destroy. Some come to clear the path." She smiled gently. "Mine did both, but I survived it, and I rebuilt." She laid the flowers down, her fingers lingering briefly. "I thought I had to become someone else to overcome what they did, but all I needed was to become more of myself." She stood slowly and opened her journal, flipping to the final page. There, in her own looping script, were the words she had been writing toward for 60 chapters of pain, betrayal, survival, and resurrection. Survivor, not victim. She closed the book and tucked it under her arm, the wind lifting the hem of her dress. No one stood beside her, no grand audience, but she had never felt less alone. As she walked back toward her car, she didn't look back. Some endings weren't meant to be revisited. Some stories didn't end with applause or revenge, but with reclamation. And Rachel had done exactly that, not through noise, not through war, but through choice, through truth, through the quiet, unwavering act of staying alive and rising. Hear the Bible verse Isaiah 54 verse 17, adapted for emphasis. "No weapon formed against you shall prosper, and every tongue that rises in judgment you shall refute." This is the heritage of the woman who stands in truth, and her vindication comes from me, says the Lord. This verse reflects Rachel's journey from betrayal and silence through survival and healing to final justice. Though the weapon was formed, it did not prosper. Her vindication came not by vengeance, but by steadfast courage and truth. Moral of the story: silence is not weakness, and survival is not surrender. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is choosing to heal, to rebuild, and to let truth speak louder than pain. Trust may shatter, but the woman who reclaims her voice will always rise stronger than the betrayal meant to break her. This story teaches that endurance is not passivity. Rachel didn't seek revenge with cruelty. She fought with evidence, dignity, and resilience. It reminds readers that healing doesn't mean forgetting, and that truth, no matter how long it's buried, always finds the strength to rise. And when it does, it sets the right people free and binds the guilty in their own lies. That's the end of the story. What did you learn from this story? Drop your thoughts in the comment section. Leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on post notification so that you'll be notified whenever we drop our next videos. Also, share this video to someone who might be interested. Thank you so much for watching.